Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of the Happy Knitting Podcast. My name is Julia, and I am coming to you as always from Munich in the south of Germany. Today is Sunday, it's the 29th of March 2020, and I'm just so happy that you're joining me today to talk about some knitting. If you're watching for the very first time, then a huge welcome to you. I really hope that you will enjoy this knitting podcast. And if you're coming back, of course, thank you so much for being a regular viewer of the podcast. I haven't reintroduced myself for a while, and as I know that there are always new people watching and subscribing, so I thought I would just very quickly introduce myself a little bit more than I usually do. So, like I said, my name is Julia. I live in Germany together with my husband. We are still living in Munich, although that is due to change hopefully pretty soon. With coronavirus happening, maybe not that soon. We will see. But yeah, it's the two of us at the moment. We are expecting our baby boy in August, which is very exciting, of course. We are both working full-time. Right now we're both working full-time from home, and I have been working from home a lot already for a while, so no big changes there. And essentially, if I'm not working or sleeping, I'm usually knitting, sometimes spinning. I've been knitting for a couple of years. I started out as a hardcore sock knitter, and I still love knitting socks. Nothing has changed there. But in the past few years, I've also spent a lot of time knitting garments. I really enjoy knitting garments, especially color work or, the sort of garments that you knit out of more woolly yarns. I really enjoy working with wool and different sheep breeds and non-superwash yarns, even though today a lot of what I'm showing you is superwash, so it just depends. But I like to branch out. I do every now and then also knit shawls. I rarely knit mittens or gloves or hats, just because, I don't know, garment knitting and sock knitting are really my two big passions, and I just love them. So I think that's all I have to say today. Like I said, I also spin. I have been spinning on a Woolmaker's Bliss wheel, which I loved. Sadly, I sold it at the end of last year because I wasn't using it as much ever since getting my Ashford E-Spinner 3, which I like it. I don't love it. I have fixed my breakband issues by essentially getting a fly fishing line and using that as a breakband. But once we move and once we kind of have an idea what's going on, and possibly once the whole baby thing is a little bit less on our mind, because I don't see myself spinning a lot in the near future, I do want to get another wheel. I would love to get the flat iron wheel. Like, that is my dream wheel right now, so maybe that'll happen sometime, but I have a feeling it's not going to be this year. I do have a sewing machine, but I don't like sewing. I just have an old sewing machine that used to be my aunt's when she was my age, which was like 25 years ago. I dabbled in sewing for a little bit, but that has been years. So I'm probably going to return that at some point, because while I love the idea of sewing, I just don't love sewing. So that is that. I do know how to crochet. I am doing a couple of crochet blankets, but I'm not very good at it. But I do really admire people who are, because crochet is like magic to me. As I talked about this in the past, knitting makes a lot of sense to me, and I have a lot of experience, and I know what I'm doing pretty well most of the time, but crochet is just a whole different beast. But anyways, that is who I am, what I do, kind of in a nutshell. So before we get started, just maybe I should talk about what I am wearing. So I am wearing a sweater by Jennifer Steingass. Please don't ask me which one. They all kind of look similar, and they all have names that I can't remember. I'm really sorry about that. But you will find this sweater and everything else that I talk about in my project pages. So I always link my project pages on Ravelry right underneath each video on YouTube. And you can then just either click on whatever project you're interested in and find all the information. And I have also made tabs at the top. So there's a garment tab, there's a socks tab, there's tabs for each year that I'm knitting in. So you should be able to navigate through that and find out more about the things that I talk about if I don't talk about them in enough detail, or if, because English isn't my first language, maybe some things aren't as understandable. The yarn that I use for this is a really nice yarn. It's the Highland Wool by Isayer. It's my first and only time using it. It's a very light wool. It kind of reminds me of like Whole Super Soft. It is a bit different in feel, but it's also like one of those thin yarns that creates a really nice airy garment. Yeah, there's a little bit of pilling, but it's not too bad, and it's just a really comfortable garment to wear. And right now I'm just really enjoying wearing all of my knitwear while it still fits me. So who knows how long that will work out, but for now I'm really enjoying it. So I think we should get started with some finished objects, followed by some works in progress and a bit of acquisitions, and then most likely a bit of chatter at the end. All right, so this week I have 2 finished objects, and one of them you haven't even seen me work on before. So look at that. Isn't that adorable? So this is obviously not a sweater for me. This is a baby sweater that I just whipped up last week. I was having, I don't want to say a couple of terrible days, but I mean, the situation is kind of hard on all of us, I think. And I had like 2 or 3 days when I just wasn't dealing with everything that well, and I decided to cast on something new and just work on something to keep me entertained and maybe sidetracked. And I ended up making a Strange Brew sweater. And the Strange Brew is it's kind of a sweater recipe by Tin Can Knits. I've talked about it a lot in the past. It's a genius pattern. I think I've made myself 3 sweaters out of that. And this is the first time I used that pattern for a children's sweater. So essentially you can choose whether you want to use a DK, Aran or sock weight gauge. You choose whether you want to knit bottom up or top down. And then you can just, do your own thing with color work, just put whatever color work or whatever you want on the sweater. So it's a really genius design. And I kind of made up my own thing. So the yarn that I'm using, or that I used, was Sandnes Garn Pear Gynt, which is my first time using it. It's a DK or worsted weight, I would say. But it is on the heavy side. It's 91 meters per 50 grams. It's a superwash yarn, and I just got this in a ton of different colors because I was going to knit another baby blanket. But realistically, I have 2 baby blankets on the go, and I'm not very far with either of them, and I don't have that much time left. So I thought I would just use it to make some baby things, and if I do end up making a blanket, this is a yarn that is quite affordable and you can basically get it anywhere, so I can always order more if I do start a blanket and I run out of yarn. So I used 3 colors. They are all on my project pages. I'm not going to read all of them out to you today because it is really boring reading out colorway numbers. But I used 150-gram ball of this mustard color. I used most of this teal color, and I have quite a bit of this like beigey creamy yarn left over. And I didn't gauge swatch because it is such a small thing, and why would I gauge swatch? I'm sorry, I just didn't. And I figured if it's a little bit too big, if my gauge is bigger, which it usually is, it will just be a 6-month size or a 12-month size. I don't really care. So I cast on actually for the Aran weight gauge, which I think was an 18 stitch gauge, because that felt more like what I would usually get, considering I am a loose knitter. And then while knitting on it, I kept on measuring and realizing that I'm kind of in between the Aran and the DK weight gauge. So I kind of fudged it all and kind of followed the DK and the Aran instructions at the same time. So I have no idea really what this came out to be, but I would say it's about a 6-month size, which is good because if the baby is born in August, this is a really, really warm sweater, and it would be good to have this around like Christmas time and throughout. And I'd rather have things be a little bit too big. Like I made pretty long cuffs that you can just roll up and they look adorable too. So yeah, and this was definitely less of a practical knit and more of just a very fun thing to knit. I knit this in 2 days. Two of the charts that I used, this one and this one down here, were actually in the Strange Brew sweater pattern. The other ones I just made up. They're very, very simple. And yeah, I just had fun with it. Considering it is an all-over colorwork sweater and it is a quite thick yarn, this is a very, very warm sweater. So it's probably not going to be the most worn thing, but I think it's adorable and it didn't use very much yarn, and yeah, he will wear it at some point. I was so worried about the neckline being too small because I'm just so scared. Like, baby heads are big, and I don't know, I don't want to have too tight of a neckline on anything. I'd rather it be too wide. So I actually didn't go down any needle sizes for the ribbing, and yeah, I think it'll be fine. And that way I'm just less scared of putting it on, and I think it will be okay. So that is one thing that I knit on, and I just really enjoyed it. And there's just something about a tiny colorwork sweater. It really makes me happy. And next up, I am very, very happy to say that I also finished my monster socks. So these are some scrappy socks that I knit out of 3 sort of big balls of leftover yarn. I think I never talked about what the yarn was in my last episode. So the lighter sort of almost creamy white with blue speckles is a yarn by Amy of Stranded. I think it's her BFL base, and what is the colorway? Is it First Frost? I'm not quite sure. I got this from my friend Marion, who knit a pair of socks, and she gave me her leftovers. This pink is actually a high twist sparkle yarn. This is from She Bought Garne, who is in Germany, and this was one of my favorite colorways of hers, and I knit myself a pair out of socks years ago out of this colorway. I think it may be Hot Kisses, but again, I'm not quite sure. And this blue yarn is by Holland Handmade, who is Erin. I don't think she's dyeing right now, but she sent this to me as a gift. And I actually used this yarn to design my tea and ice cream socks. No, couch cracker socks. I'm sorry, I'm getting my own patterns confused. But I used her yarn for my own design, and this was just a bit of leftovers that I had, and I just thought they went really well together. And then I used a different sparkly mini for the heels. So the heels are Fish's Kiss heels in garter stitch, and I knit these toe up. I knit them 2 at a time, which was really fun. I really enjoy knitting 2 at a time at the moment. And because I felt like they were too big throughout the foot, I don't know why I felt that way. They just looked big, even though my gauge was fine, my needle size, my stitch count, everything was as usual, but they just felt too big. So I decided to do a ribbed cuff. So it's essentially straight after the heel, I started knitting everything in 2x2 rib, and it gives a really nice fitting sock. I tried them on and they fit really well, so I'm not really sure why I was so worried, but they are done. I loved making them. They were quite fun. And I usually hate making scrappy things because I hate weaving in ends. But as I talked about on my last Prepper podcast episode, so not the special episode, but my last actual podcast episode, which has a number, I found out about the Clasped Weft join, and that basically eliminates the need for weaving in your ends. It's really genius. I have already posted a link to the video that I used by Louise Tilbrook in my project pages if you're interested. So that meant once I was done knitting these, I just had 2 ends to weave in, one at the toe and one where I bound off, and all the other ends I could just clip off, and that was really good. So now I can definitely see myself making more sort of scrappy socks and just generally scrappy projects. So yes, they're done. I love them. They're my usual sock recipe. So I did 64 stitches on a 2.25 millimeter US size 1 needle. And while I mostly knit cuff down, every now and then I like knitting toe up as well. So these were knit toe up, and yeah, here we are. So for works in progress, first up, I'm stabbing myself with my needles. The first project that I've been working on, which I showed you last week, and I was knitting on this actually on my Q&A video, which I posted I think last Thursday, is of course my So Faded sweater, which is a pattern by Andrea Mowry. I have been modifying this pattern quite a bit, and I'm not sure if I talked about this. So first up, what did I do? Pregnancy dementia is real, you guys. You're supposed, or you cast on in the beginning and you work flat, and then you're supposed to do the neckband at the very, very end of the sweater. But I like to do my neckbands pretty early on because first of all, it looks more like a finished thing, and then I can try it on, and adding a neckline always adds a lot of stability to the garment, and sometimes it pulls it up a bit. So I added in my neckline quite early on. I also did a 1x1 rib rather than a 2x2 rib, and I used quite small needles, so the neckline on the pattern is actually, it's kind of a wide neckline. It's not super huge, but it's a big neckline, and I just wanted to draw it in a little bit, so I used pretty small needles. I think I used sock needles for the neckline. I also kind of improvised on the raglan increases. First of all, because I am knitting this on a bigger size than I usually would, because I'm finding sizing quite difficult at the moment because I want to make things that I can actually wear while I'm pregnant, but of course I want to wear them afterwards. So I'm knitting the 42-inch bust size, but I only knit this the sleeves to a, I think, 38, size 38. And what this pattern does, it actually has double increases at the bottom. I don't want to say anything more about that because I obviously don't want to give away the pattern, but I just don't like the look of that because it tends to give you like bunching here, which isn't very flattering. So what I did is I modified the crap out of this and did my own thing with the increases, and I'm not going to go into detail about it, but I also ended up just casting on double the amount of stitches under the arms, so it gives me a bit more room throughout the sweater without being all bunchy at the top, because I think it should fit. And really, I should just try it on because I have not tried this on at all and I really could. But anyways, I modified it a little bit, and then after separating for the sleeves, I'm only using 3 colors of yarn, so I think the original is knitted with 4 or 5 colors. But I just started alternating between my first and second color right after splitting for the sleeves. And now I am, I would say, halfway through my second color. So I'm just working on 1 color right now. The yarn is hedgehog fibers in their sock base, so it's a 90-10 merino nylon base. And this was their October Fade Club. I talked about in the past how I had the Fade Club for 3 months. And 2 of the shipments, sadly, I didn't like, so I actually destashed them, and this was the only yarn that I kept. And yeah, I'm turning it into a sweater. So that is where we are with that. I think I was quite monogamous on this even after last podcast. So I'm quite happy with the fact of how much progress I am making quite quickly on a fingering weight garment. This has quite a lot of stitches. I am making this to be quite oversized, so I think the original suggests either no ease or very little ease, so it's a very sort of tight sweater that's very form-fitting, and that is not what I want. So mine is going to be much more oversized and baggy, and yeah, so it's quite a lot of stitches, but I am enjoying it. I think I'm going to try it on later today, and yeah, it's just a lot of stockinette in the round. I will see how I go. I'm not sure if I want to make it cropped or if I want to make it long. I think I will probably just make it a bit more cropped than I usually would, so maybe just before my hip, maybe even higher than that. I'm not quite sure. And again, I will probably not make full-length sleeves. I tend to like my sleeves sort of like this. Like, they're not elbow length, they're not bracelet length, they're kind of in between, and I find that quite comfortable because I tend to be warm rather than feel cold. And I always push up my sleeves anyways with my long sleeve sweaters, so that's kind of where I'm leaning, but who knows, we will see. But that is my So Faded sweater. And then I have cast on in 2 new projects, and both of these I cast on yesterday and today. So yesterday I was actually planning on casting on some more socks because I finished my monster socks, and hang on, my project bags are tangled. So I went into my stash, and then I couldn't really find what I wanted. I looked at a couple of patterns that I have in my library already, and it just didn't work out. So I ended up doing something entirely different. And this is also kind of leading into acquisitions, so I think I'll just talk about all of that at once. So for a couple of months, actually, I've been thinking about getting a couple of sweater quantities of mohair yarn, because I've never knit a mohair like sweater, where you hold a strand of mohair with a strand of wool yarn. But I have so many sweater quantities, and a lot of them are in very fine yarn, and a couple I just feel I have just been feeling like jumping on the mohair train, which I haven't for a long time. But I just thought it would be good if I could find some affordable mohair, because mohair tends to be quite expensive, to then hold double with stash that I already have and get some stash knit up. And so what I have actually done is I have ordered some mohair yarn, and this is from a company that has many names. I think internationally it's called, or at least it used to be called Fair Wool. In Germany it used to be called Fair Alpaca, and they have recently changed their name to Hansafarm. So don't ask me. But they are a wool company. I think they started with alpaca yarn from Peru, but they also have merino bases and mohair silk, I think, possibly also cashmere. It's very ethically sourced, which I really, really like, and you can only buy it in sort of bigger quantities, which is how they keep the price very affordable. So they had these 100 grams sets of mohair silk, and I just bought it in 3 colors. I got this sort of beige color, I got the natural white, which unfortunately I will have to cake up, and I'm not looking forward to that, and I got a red color, because those are all colors that I kind of need for my stash anyways. And so yesterday I decided to just cast on with the red mohair. And with it, I am using a stash yarn that I feel like without the mohair, I would not be getting around to this forever. This is actually one of the skeins of Wollmeise lace, which, if you don't know, they come in a 300 gram skein. And 300, it's more like a very light fingering weight yarn. So I think it's about 1500 or 1600 meters per 300 grams, which in itself is enough for a sweater, of course. And I bought this burgundy color, which I believe is the RH negative colorway. Last year, I have like 3 of these massive cakes in my stash in different colors. I knit my boxy out of one of these cakes, but I just don't see myself making 3 more boxies. And this is like very thin yarn, so just holding it single, it would take a long time to make garments out of it. So I thought it would be perfect to pair these together and get this out of stash. So I contemplated for quite a while as to what pattern I want to knit, and in the end I settled on something which I think will be very, very wearable. So I'm thinking I need more cardigans, because I am going to get bigger in the next couple of months, and then I possibly might be breastfeeding, so having a couple of cardigans would be really handy. And this was very much inspired by Maria Monska of Stitched in Sweden, because she made the no frills cardigan. And it is by Petite Knit, and I have a mixed relationship with her patterns. I have knit her no frills sweater twice, and I don't really agree with her ideas of size inclusivity. She has recently expanded her no frills sweater size range, but even the expansion is still not very size inclusive at all. And for this one, the no frills cardigan, the sizes are very, very limited. So I am already knitting the size medium, but I'm only doing that because I'm doing less ease than is recommended, and because my gauge is a little bit off. So realistically, even I would have probably had to make a large or extra large to get the ease desired in the pattern. So there's just something wrong with that. And while I like her patterns, I like her pattern writing style because I am quite an experienced knitter. But I think if you're not as experienced, they are not the clearest patterns. So I have a mixed relationship with it. And I thought whether I could or whether I would be comfortable knitting the sweater anyways, because every time I do something on the podcast, even though I'm not, being paid to advertise anything, of course it is motivating other people to maybe do the same thing. So I want to be quite honest about how I feel about these things. But having said that, this is just exactly what I wanted in terms of a cardigan. The original No Frills cardigan is very long. I don't have that much mohair. Of course, I'm playing yarn chicken, like you have to save your money somehow, and I save my money by buying 2 little yarn all the time. So I'm probably going to make it quite short, like a short cardigan. Probably, I'm not even sure if I'm going to do full length sleeves. I don't think I will, because with fluffy mohair, like the sleeves are just going to be in the way anyways. So again, I will just see how far I get with the yarn and how I feel about it, but I'd rather have more length in the body than in the sleeves. And yeah, this is where we are. So I'm showing it to you. I guess it makes sense to show it to you that way. So you start with a provisional cast on, and there's this beautiful neck edging, and I have since picked up for the back, and now I am just, working my increases for the raglan. And so this will go around like this and eventually grow to be my sweater. I really like how this is working up. Like I said, this is my first ever garment that I'm knitting with mohair. I did a swatch, and the swatch looks really funny because I didn't want to be using too much of my mohair silk yarn, because again, I don't have that much. So I used some old mohair that I have had in stash for part of the swatch, then used a little bit of the mohair that I'm actually using to make sure that it has the same properties and gives me the same gauge, and so it looks like a very funny swatch. But I really like it. It's very fuzzy. So I'm very curious how much I will like wearing it, but it does feel really nice. I did a hat once out of, I think it was hedgehog fibers and a skein of the Drops kid mohair silk. And I find that quite scratchy. I remember wearing that hat throughout my Oslo trip, and I was so itchy the entire time. The mohair was killing me. But I have since realized that the Drops mohair, I think, is a bit more itchy than some of the other mohair yarns. So far this feels pretty good to me, and I think, again, I'm the most sensitive on my forehead. So I think it should be fine, and I do really like the sort of slightly marred effect, because the mohair is a bit more, it's lighter and a bit more on the like orangey red side than this burgundy. So I think it works out really, really well. So that is where I am with that. And then this morning, pretty much like before I started this podcast, I did end up casting on a pair of socks as well, because I cannot not have socks on the needles. Like, that is just impossible. And I've been looking through my stash and deciding what to do, and in the end I picked some stash that was a very random sort of sale purchase that I made once. And that is 250-gram skeins of yarn that I got from Garnet Salk, which is a Danish yarn company, and I think I recently found out that it's basically just called yarn sale in Danish. And this was my very first time trying their Black Hill socket, which is their sock yarn, so it's a wool nylon blend. And I remember getting this when I got a couple of sweater quantities from them, because they had this on sale for, like, I don't know, €1 per 50-gram skein, something really, really ridiculous. So I just thought I would get some neon colors. So I have 2 50-gram balls, and this is where we are. So I'm once again doing two at a time socks, because I'm just really enjoying them at the moment. And what I think is I'm just going to play with the colors a little bit. So I don't want to do stripy socks, but I will definitely be switching out the colors after the cuff. And I'm thinking right now that I'll probably do a 3x1 ribbed sock, because I really like 3x1 ribbed socks. And then maybe further down the leg or something, have a couple of stripes in between. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing, but I do want to just kind of make these sort of opposite socks. So maybe one will have a pink leg and the other one will have a yellow leg, and then I will switch it around, something like that. So I will just make that up as I go, but that is where we are right now. Yeah, so that is my current sock project. And with that, I mean, I have already pretty much talked about my acquisitions anyways, so I have skipped that segment for myself. So all that is left to talk about, I believe, is just what's going on and chatter. So if you're only here for the knitting content, then thank you so much for watching, and I will be back next week. But of course, if you do want to stick around, feel free, and I'm just going to ramble on about what's going on, and if you're not interested in that, that is absolutely fine. So, what's been going on? It feels like we've been on lockdown for 3 weeks, but it's really only been one. It feels like longer for me because I have been kind of self-isolating for a while longer based on what my doctor told me and all of that, just being pregnant and all of that. So I am in no real danger at all, but it has meant that I've been home for quite a while, but I think we're doing pretty well. First of all, thankfully, we're both feeling very good and feeling pretty safe. So we're just trying to get through one day at a time because making long-term plans right now is quite difficult. So yeah, this week has not been very different to the last couple of weeks. It's basically been work and knitting and knitting and work. We had snow in the beginning of the week, which was terrible, and then it's been quite nice for a couple of days, and we're supposed to have snow again next week, which I'm not excited about. I think tomorrow is going to be like really freezing and snowy, and I'm so over the winter. I really enjoy the couple of days that we've had where I could sit on my balcony in the sun. Like, that is just amazing, and that is what I want right now. But yeah, we've been doing fine. We've been doing a lot more cooking. I actually feel like baking, and I never bake, so that is really, really strange. But it is impossible to get flour or yeast here, so baking is somewhat limited, sadly. Today is actually our first wedding anniversary. So it's been exactly a year since Kai and I got married, which is crazy. And like, to think what has happened 1 year later is kind of crazy. But yeah, so instead of, going out, we'll be celebrating at home, which is absolutely fine. We haven't really made any specific plans. I'm not sure if I'm going to cook anything because we don't have like exciting cooking stuff at home, like just basic cooking things. So we might just get takeout and light a candle, and whatever we do, it'll be fine. I know we have lots of ice cream, which is amazing. So it's going to be pretty uneventful, but I'm totally fine with that. Yeah, so that's what's been going on, really. What else can I tell you? Not a whole lot, to be honest. I wanted to thank you, though, for your feedback on my special Q&A episode. That was really sweet. I never know if like Q&A videos and just the more rambly type videos are interesting, and I totally appreciate that it's not interesting for everyone, and that is 100% fine by me. Like, not everyone has to like everything, but it was nice to get some good feedback and some follow-up questions. So I will do that at some point. I have already started writing down new questions, and I will likely do another type of that video quite soon. I also asked folks on Instagram about my recent shift of podcast location because I've really been enjoying podcasting in here in my living room, in my comfortable chair, rather than in my craft room / office. And I was very, very happy to see that actually more people favorite this location, but at the same time, a lot of people seem to like both. So that's really great because it just means that I have more options in what I want to do with this podcast. And while I am usually someone who doesn't like change and will never change anything, I am really enjoying this new format of the podcast. And by the way, if you're wondering, I'm not sure if you can see, maybe you can't even tell why I am sitting in my chair without any like the chair is basically naked. There is no cover underneath it. That is because yesterday I was having a bit of a weird day. I just couldn't get comfortable all day. And I finally had the perfect setup. So I'm sitting right in front of our balcony window, and I had both the doors open, and the sun was coming in. And after getting up a million times because I always forgot something, I forgot to bring over my measuring tape for knitting and this and that. I finally had everything set up perfectly. I had my coffee, and then I spilled my coffee over my white chair, over my boxy sweater that I was wearing, over the floor. It just went everywhere. And it wasn't just coffee, it was coffee with milk and syrup, and oh my gosh, you guys, the mess was huge. So for the first time ever, and probably not a bad idea in general, I had to wash the cover of our chair, and it was just a huge mess. And that is why I'm kind of recording in a chair that is missing half the chair. Yeah, Murphy's Law. I mean, those things have to happen. And considering how much coffee I have, I don't spill my coffee very often. I mean, sometimes I will readily admit that I will make coffee in the coffee machine without putting a cup underneath. That has happened. But yeah, so that was a dilemma that I had yesterday. But the good thing is I was actually knitting on my no frills cardigan when that happened, and I managed to not spill coffee on my knitting or on the fancy mohair yarn. So I mean, my priorities were pretty okay. I have since actually washed and blocked my boxy, so my boxy is back in old shape and is looking quite good. So all in all, it is fine. So anyways, that is my weird coffee / chair story of the weekend. I will hopefully be back with another special shorter episode throughout the week, and then with a normal podcast episode next weekend. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're staying at home if you can, staying healthy. I hope all your family is healthy and you're just making the best of this situation that we have. And if you're not feeling that great, then please know that you're not alone. It is tough for everyone. And I think it's really important to, while being positive, also be realistic and just say that, I mean, this is something we haven't been through before, and it is scary, and it is making more people anxious than usual, and that is absolutely normal, okay? So normal as well, and completely okay. So yeah, I hope wherever you are, this podcast maybe brings you a little bit of joy and maybe a bit of knitting inspiration. And I thank you so much for spending this time with me. I will see you next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, happy knitting. Bye!